And welcome everybody to another episode 17 to be precise, of the Cripple Connection podcast. As always, my name is Cody Lashton. You can follow me on Twitter at CODYLAC. As always, I am joined by my partner in crime, Jeffrey Redmond. Jeffrey, what's going on, brother?
Hey, Cody, how are you, man?
Another day, another Cripple Connection podcast to get through, man. But we have a great show in store for you today, so if you like what we do and you want to hear more of it, hit the subscribe button and give us a like so that way we're seen by more people, and hit the notification bell so that way you are always given notifications as to when we go live on your favorite handicap video game podcast, dude. Anyway, Jeffrey, ain't nothing to it but to do it, man.
Right.
You know, it's been kind of a slow news cycle, you know, when we're not reviewing games that have come out, you know. There are certain things, you know, that we try and scour the internet to talk about. And we got a big one. A massive, what is being called Gigaleak by, I guess it was a group of hackers who found this information. But essentially, long story short, they found access to a treasure trove of files regarding many popular Nintendo video games dating all the way back to the SNES era, really showing deleted assets and things that were supposed to be in video games that weren't, even things like titles to sequels that never materialized. Jeffrey, there's almost so much to go through with this. I don't even know where to start. What have you heard and what have you read about this, and what's kind of your initial takeaway? And then I guess after that we can kind of go over some things that maybe we found that we thought were interesting in this massive information dump.
What I found most interesting is just the amount of because this is like base source. This is like right? Base. So they were able to go. See details that weren't in the final products of these games, like you were saying. There's mentions of sequels, like a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, you know, Zelda, which ended up getting its own sequel in Majora's Mask. But even still, these plans kind of detail more like scrapped ideas. Like, for example, in Super Mario 64, Luigi was supposed to be in the game, like as a playable thing, and he's nowhere to be found in the final product. But it's amazing because Nintendo is so secretive and so guarded about their particular franchises. I think it's cool to get a look underneath and see how the company operates, both on a technical level as well as, you know, the actual like social implications of this kind of thing. So it is a lot to get through, though. It's a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, really. I mean, tell me if you think this is off base. As far as the video game industry is concerned, this has to be one of the biggest leaks of all time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, considering the amount of information that we're receiving, I mean, it's really hard for me to remember another time where there was something bigger than this that released so much information about titles that we all know and love. I mean, one of the ones that I found interesting, and I'll go ahead and share it with you so you can read. And by the way, this is like a testament to me on why sometimes you kind of have to sidestep Law and Order to get some cool shit to happen. And what I mean by that, so a lot of information has been released, but one of them coming from the Star Fox universe. So not only did they release all of the audio files of the original voice actors recording Star Fox, but they even found perhaps the most notable as previously stated, the leak also contained a lot of other interesting files Perhaps most notable is the inclusion of a black female pilot that was cut from Star Fox 2. Since the discovery, many are calling for her to become an official character in a future Star Fox game, as Nintendo has been confronted for lacking diversity. In a similar vein, these unused Star Fox 2 portraits have been garnering attention due to how memeable they are. They also found early designs for Yoshi and even the presence of Luigi in Super Mario 64 within the leaks. I mean, you're talking about, that's a huge deal, man.
It is.
A lot of this. And we would have never gotten this information if it wasn't for a leak like this. And this is where I'm kind of torn. It's like, I understand that Nintendo, they have a right to secrecy. They're their own business. They're allowed to do things in private and not give all their tips of trade out to other companies and other developers. They're allowed that air of privacy. But man, I'll be damned if this isn't cool as fuck, man. Like,
yeah.
And the fact that now what we just read, there's been a lack of diversity, and there was a black character that they cut, and now they're trying to add because the internet is pushing them to do so. I always say that a company will never do anything until they're incentivized to do so. So, for example, the Washington Redskins had to change their name because the sponsors were pulling out and say, we don't want to be associated with a team that has that kind of name. People had been asking the owner to do it for years, and only now does he do it. Well, now you have people that can add the fire to the feet of Nintendo to do some cool shit like this, and it wouldn't have happened unless we ended up getting access to this personal leaked information.
Yeah, and that's kind of why these things are cool, right? So a lot of these things, a lot of the final versions you get of games are nowhere near usually the ambition or the scope of the original idea, right? So usually there's a lot of cut content in video games simply due to time constraints and programming constraints and all these other different things.
Right.
So it's kind of cool to see a lot of this in its raw, unfiltered format. Even though I'm not a coder, I took coding in college, but I'm no major expert on this stuff. But luckily, a lot of other people are, and they're able to pull out these assets that we've never seen before, and it's really neat. Like you said, I think, and I understand where Nintendo's coming from. Like you said, they're a company, they're entitled to privacy. I understand that entirely, but I also think I'm on the conservationist side of things, so I like to have these games and prototypes and stuff well known, simply for the fact that they deserve to be known about. And I think the guy responsible for this, and one of the articles suggested this, but this isn't the first time he's done this. Apparently he stole an old Pokemon prototype from way back in the day, and it surfaced on the internet recently. So it's cool because not only that, but it allows source code for emulation, which I know is technically illegal. But
yeah, and I know that this is something that you wanted to talk about too, and I definitely wanted to hit on that, but to also kind of show how big a lot of this information is, and it's like looking into a parallel universe of what could have been. So for example, we know that The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time, they had a planned sequel. They were going to have the Ocarina of Time 2, and for whatever reason, you find out that it didn't happen that way. It didn't turn out. I mean, you're talking about one of the greatest games of all time, one of the highest reviewed games of all time, and they were gonna plan to make a sequel about it. And even though a sequel, like the article mentions here, they did have a sequel later on down the road in Majora's Mask, it wasn't a direct follow-up with the same title like this would have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It doesn't really say what the story would have been either. But like stuff like that is a big deal, and
Definitely.
and knowing about it even makes you think. What what do you think Nintendo feels? Are they hating this? Are they are they liking this? I mean, obviously they're not liking it, but you did bring up the when it comes to emulations, why this kind of matters. And for those who don't know, emulators, they allow you to play old school video games on your computer without having to buy that game or buy that console and having to go on eBay and scour the internet for old copies and stuff. You can just play these old time games, and Nintendo it doesn't want that. They want you to pay Nintendo. So tell us a little bit more about that, Jeffrey.
Well, Nintendo has they typically, what they do is they will sell you back some of these old titles in weird ways. So on the Wii and the Wii U, you had the virtual eShop where you could, buy old individual titles. Or in the case of right now, you have a Nintendo Switch Online, and they have a Nintendo and Super Nintendo app within there that allows you to play a certain amount of games. It's part of your $20 a year, online fee that they make you pay. But even those are very select games, and those only get updated, whenever Nintendo ever feels like it.
Yeah.
But a lot of these games can't be played anymore unless you own the original console and cartridge, because a lot of these, like, I'm thinking like all the partnerships that Capcom had with Disney. So
Yeah.
you had like Chippendales and DuckTales, and all those games, and many others that have partnerships that have expired. They're not going to be on these systems anymore.
Right.
That there's no way to get them other than to get the original game itself. So source code like this allows basically for backwards compatibility. So, programmers can take this information, make these emulator programs that run on your computer better than they are now, and basically allow you to play these games for absolutely nothing. Now, that might seem like stealing, and it is, honestly.
Yes.
But at the same time, if they're not making money off of it because they're not offering it, is it real?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's.
So,
I mean, it's kind of. I mean, I'm torn. I'm all about a free and open internet. And I like that decentralized thing that the internet has going on, that politicians around the world are trying to actively stomp out. So I don't know, like that. This kind of connects to other things in life more than just video games. But the fact that things like this can happen, it does. It's like the circle of life. It writes the system, and it makes sure that. Well, it doesn't necessarily make sure of anything, but what it does is it gives people an insight into, I guess, even what goes into making these games, and
exactly.
and how much truly does get cut out on and left out on the cutting room floor. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, that in the development process they either decide that the level doesn't fit the flow or the vibe of the game, or there's one character that maybe they just don't have enough time. So, for example, like the black character or female character that was cut from Star Fox. Who knows? I mean, it's easy to say, and I'm sure there was a degree of maybe some racism there, but it also could have just been a scenario where, they don't have enough time to meet the deadline to be able to put in all these other assets and voice files for different characters, and it's just a peek behind the curtain. And one of the more interesting ones that I found is, I mean, I guess they were even showing the level of planning that went into this too, because there was a 3D model of Link from Legend of Zelda, and this was around the SNES era. So this was before the Nintendo 64 came out. They had already been toying with the idea of Legend of Zelda in 3D.
Right.
So
yeah,
they show some images of it, and they look very crude. I mean, you can make out the sword and shield, but you know, it's like I said, I love this kind of stuff. I hate that the developers and the people that work on it, like, I mean, they're hating it, but for the most part, it seems to be nothing but good things that have come out of this, and if anything, it shows how much people care about these Nintendo properties.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. So these are old. Most of these are old. So it's like, yeah, I know you've got, like I said, you've got the programs on the Switch, and you do have like the Nintendo Mini and the Super Nintendo Mini that do have, you know, games compiled on there.
Right.
But that's just a small selection of these things. So when something like this comes along and you really get to see how these kinds of things are made and what's been left on the cutting room floor, it gives you a sense of how like massive they had intended these things to be, but didn't have either the technology or the time to really, you know, fine-tune things the way that they wanted to.
Yeah.
Which I think is where the concept of DLC for newer games comes in.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of that concept carries over to DLC. So, you know, cutting something out of the main game and then charging for it again, yeah, we don't like it, but a lot of these might be, you know, in the same vein as this, where it was just material that they, you know, didn't have time to do, and, you know, were able to add in later. So it's before all that, but it's kind of interesting because I think it's sort of the same playing field on that one.
Yeah.
But like I said, Nintendo has been very secretive about their stuff. They also are the ones pretty much responsible for shutting down a lot of the major ROM sites, and ROM is just a fancy term for games. So websites that host games that you can download for these emulators. Nintendo is the one responsible for shutting down like Cool ROM and MU Paradise and all the big places where you used to get your ROMs from, because, you know, they saw it as a breach of efficacy and all that.
Right.
But if they aren't gonna preserve their own games properly, who the hell else is going to?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
and again, you're right. It fills a void that they weren't doing it. So, you know, it's kind of like the free market, or not necessarily the free market, but, you know, the people get their way by any means necessary. I wanted to highlight some comments. Joe Riolano in our chat room says they have to be upset. They say that in press, any press is good press, but I don't think this is the case. So yeah, that's a great point. And you know, it's, yeah, I mean, really, I guess it says a lot about your security also. Like the fact that someone was just able to do this. This is definitely not a good look for them. And I don't think, and you've brought it up, and I do want us to double down on this. For people who don't know, Nintendo is one of the most secretive in-house organizations that there is, man. They keep a lot of their info, a lot of their news in-house. They don't release a lot of details. I mean, a lot of this is like coveted behind-the-scenes information on how Nintendo goes about making their most successful video games, their most iconic titles. And when you are releasing this kind of information, yeah, it does have egg on your face, you know, but again, it's one of those, like, I see both sides. I understand their right to privacy, and Nintendo not having too many eyes and ears, commenting and critiquing their decisions that are alone their decisions to make. But
Right.
then again, on the other side, you have these cool things where, now we might be able to get to see characters that we've never seen before in
Right.
popular video game titles, or maybe we're going to be able to see new enthusiasm for entire games that had been scrapped. But
Mhm.
maybe Nintendo just thought, maybe they read the market wrong and thought that there wasn't much of an audience for something. Ended up throwing it out. Now these leaks end up happening, and now all of a sudden there's fan enthusiasm about a game that was ultimately never made. So you can dip back into that well of money that's essentially sitting on the table from fans that might want that kind of new content. So
Exactly. Um, they, like you said, they could easily spin this in a positive direction. Star Fox, for example. I mean, there was Star Fox Zero on the Wii U, which was basically a retelling of the first game. But I mean, that franchise is so untapped, and with all this new stuff coming out about it, they could easily, you know, do another one and do it right. So I don't. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you could easily take all these unused assets and put them back in, and suddenly, everybody's excited again. Um, I I don't know. I'm a preservationist, so I like the idea of people not that probably necessarily shouldn't have their hands in stuff, but I like that they do,
right,
because I mean, without them, I mean, 20 years from now, who the hell is going to know what a Nintendo Entertainment System is? I
yeah.
mean,
If
I mean,
Nintendo is still around, which hopefully they
well,
are, I'm pretty sure they
that's
might
what I
be.
mean.
Yeah,
Like, you know, those old, especially those old consoles, they don't hold up very well, like in
no,
terms of their quality. So they break down really easy,
yeah,
especially the old Nintendo, because it used that stupid little prong system, and you always had to blow in the damn cartridge, and all that
yeah.
shit.
Those are
Like,
the good old days when times were simpler.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, uh, you know, eventually, all these, even if you do manage to find an old system, right? Eventually, all these things are going to rot away, and there's going to be no way to play these old games. So, 40 years, or hell, 20 years from now, if I have kids and I want to show them, these damn
Yeah,
games, there's going to be no physical way to do it other than to have these emulators and these ROMs. So, I don't know. I'm I'm on both ends. I really don't know.
yeah, and I also see how it's a way that those ROMs and emulators make it to where, if you can just download those, then Nintendo can't monetize their own intellectual property. So I,
True.
I, I get that that's a problem too, and it's very
Right.
much the corporation versus the consumer, right? If I
Exactly. Yeah.
if I'm a high up executive at Nintendo, yeah, I fucking hate this. This sucks. But
Right.
if you're a consumer, it just means that you get to play the games that you know and love easier, and as you said, you're going to be able to show it to an entirely new generation of people. Um, so there's definitely that. I mean, listen, Jeffrey and I kind of threw this together to be able to talk about this today. It's been going on for a while, but Jeffrey, I think since there's so much information, it'll be cool if going forward, just throughout the week, you and I can just kind of look at some of the stuff being unearthed, and
Definitely.
every week or two, if we have some new information or stuff that we found that we thought was interesting, we can kind of come back to this well. Because we've just highlighted a few topics
Yeah.
here today, but there is a never-ending amount of shit. I mean, like I said earlier, this is has to be one of the biggest video game leaks of all time.
I think they said it was. I think they've pretty much confirmed that. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, man.
yeah. So we had another bit of news that came out yesterday, and Jeffrey and I, if you've been watching any of our recent shows, Jeffrey and I have been very candid about Microsoft and how we really don't believe that they're putting their best foot forward. And how the games either don't look up to par or they're not showing enough detail and gameplay, and there aren't enough third-party and titles of games that are exclusive to the Xbox. And Jeffrey and I have been very candid about this, but I'm going to heap some praise on them today, and this is also kind of related to the one positive thing that I did have to say about Microsoft the last time we spoke about this, and it's their Game Pass system. Just about all those games that you saw during that Xbox press conference are going to be available on Xbox Game Pass. But another really big deal that came out is that Halo Infinite is going to be a free-to-play multiplayer game running at 120 frames per second on Xbox Series X Battle Pass system. And this is a big deal because a lot of games, most famously Fortnite and now Call of Duty, have been moving to this system. And when you look at the success, specifically of Fortnite, but also now Call of Duty jumping onto that train as well, man, this is a big deal, and I think this is a way of Microsoft reaching out to their fan base and saying, we hear you, and we're still doing some cool shit that we want you to be a part of. Jeffrey, what do you think about this?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is probably one of the best moves they have made recently, because the whole thing is, I think a lot of people were very disappointed with that conference, and specifically, and even with Halo itself, I've seen very mixed reactions to it. A lot of people are saying it doesn't look that great. A lot of people had stuff to say about it being open world, and whether that's actually going to fit or not, I don't know. But and to be fair, we haven't actually seen anything on the multiplayer side of this game at all. But the fact that you're not, the fact that it's part of that Game Pass, and I mean, just it's free. Well, not free because you have to pay for the pass, but still, like the base part of it's free. And I imagine, like Fortnite, like Apex, like all those other things, the battle pass will be for like cosmetics,
right,
or something that you don't absolutely need to own. So essentially, all you have to do is pay for the Xbox membership, and you've got the game for free. So, I mean...
Yeah, and one of the comments on this website that was under it... Well, actually, let me not get ahead of myself. First, I wanted to point out how dumb this is, and that you'd think that the video games industry would almost know better by now than in how they release their information. Because yet again, and I'm going to read the paragraph as it says, because it's written very well and gets to the point. The leak started with, as they usually do, a retailer accidentally posting some information early. That retailer was Smith's Toys, who apparently leaked the multiplayer info before quickly pulling it down. One lucky insider was able to snap up a screenshot and provide a few more details regarding Halo Infinite's multiplayer. And again, like, dude, this is always the way it happens. Like,
yeah.
If you're game developers, how do you not know that, like, Best Buy and Target and even Walmart and Smith's Toys, whoever the fuck that is, like, how do you not know that they're not going to put out this information? Like, you know that they're going to.
Right.
I mean, now I know who Smith's Toys is, and that's, I didn't know them before, but now I do, so it's good for them. And it
right.
Essentially, it forced Halo, or 343 and Xbox, to actually come out and confirm this.
Yeah.
And I will say again, and I'll pass it to you, Jeffrey. It does.
Yep.
It does feel, again, though, like they're having to respond. Like they're having to respond to something. Like they didn't even necessarily want to put this information out, but they were kind of had their hand forced into doing so since, well, the information is already out there. We might as well just drop this.
Right. And I think, honestly, I think this just comes from the internet age in general, and this goes for the Nintendo Gigaleak that we talked about too. It's just people have more readable access not only to information but the ability to spread information. So,
Right.
I mean, like back in the day, there would have been no way to get a handle on any of these things. But now that the internet is pretty much free flowing, it can post just about anything, anywhere.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, this has happened a lot recently with specific toy outlets or whatever, making things noticeable beforehand, or even like things they get posted on Twitter or whatever, or they weren't supposed to be there, but people just take shots of it.
Yeah. But nevertheless, here we are. But what do you think about?
Exactly.
What do you think about this move as a whole, though? The Halo multiplayer being free to play.
I think it's great, because I don't know. Halo's multiplayer, at least back in the day, was genre defining. It was the thing that basically put shooters on the map. I mean, there was GoldenEye for the N64. I suppose that's what really started the trend of shooters in general. But as far as like massive, multiplayer online shooting, it was Halo. So, unfortunately, like I said in the last podcast, they don't have that leg up anymore. Shooters are a dime a dozen. And in fact, I think that's why they've chosen to do this. It's like, well, how else are we going to compete with everybody else? Otherwise people are going to move to Fortnite and Call of Duty Warzone.
Right.
Why take the option where you have to pay when I can get, a similar or probably even better experience elsewhere for free?
Right.
So, I think it's a smart move on their part. Whether it'll end up paying off or not is yet to be seen, because we haven't seen any of the multiplayer itself. But I think it's a smart move.
I do too, and I'm even thinking of it like, knowing. So let's actually go over all the information that we know and then piece it together, and I think that'll kind of better implement or better showcase how much of a big deal I feel this is for them. So this is supposed to be an open world game. Okay, the map should be fucking enormous, and we didn't get to see parts of it, parts of the map and how big it truly was. So you're talking about a multiplayer experience on an open world map, and you're going to be able to customize, your own version of Master Chief. So another thing is they're going to be implementing, what I'm assuming, and this is being rumored, that they're going to have a battle pass system. So it's similar to Fortnite, where whenever there's a new update of brand new like clothes and decorations and shit that are in the store, they're gonna do that also for Halo. So essentially, you're gonna pay for your battle pass once every while and get a bunch of cosmetics, and you're gonna be able to customize your character. I think if they're really able to amp up the level of customization that you have, really incentivize people to buy that battle pass, I think you could have a really good number of people that would be invested in this and actually sink money to this, especially if they felt like they're able to go on this open world first person shooting adventure with your best friends online in multiplayer. Like, in my mind, that harkens back to what Halo really was, like what you were talking about, just being playing online after school, shooting people up, customizing your version of Master Chief. Like, this is what would get me to buy something like this if I was going to, you know. This is the type of thing that um, I'll put it this way: Microsoft needed this kind of news, and I applaud them for trying to make decisions that might seem out of left field, but actually make sense from a financial standpoint. And when I say financial standpoint, I pretty much mean instead of having, so for example, you used to have to buy the game and have an Xbox Live Gold membership in order to be able to play the multiplayer. Well, now that's not true anymore, and you're adding another way to continue to incentivize multiplayer by having a battle pass where people are continuing to pay into it to get whatever's in the store. Like, this is a good thing for them, and I think if you were on the fence about Halo or maybe you weren't as excited about it, that alone is enough for me to say, okay, I wasn't too impressed by the graphics, but they weren't terrible either, and I don't really give a shit if the game is going to be fun and I'm going to be able to play it with all my friends. Like, this could also be a streamer's best friend for everyone intending to stream this.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if the multiplayer is going to be set in these, you know, in the open world with, or if they're just going to be like big arenas. I don't know if it's going to be like a, you know, a smaller chunk of the game map or whatever. There's still a lot of, you know, unknowns about this.
I believe that is what they're implying. I could be wrong, but I believe that is what they're saying. And to boot, 120 frames per second.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah,
on a console crazy. Especially. I mean, on a PC, you know, people are getting like 200 frames a second for most of their games if you have the hardware to push it. But for a console, that is extremely impressive, especially for a first-person shooter. You need all the frames you could get as far as, you know, accuracy and everything else is concerned. Right. So if they actually manage to pull that off, I will be severely impressed, because that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and you know, again, this is another thing also that is it's Xbox flexing their muscle, also saying, one, okay, so we know that this is an exclusive. We definitely know Halo is not coming out for PlayStation. And then on top of that, this is essentially doing something that you're only saying the Xbox can do. Have we seen any, and I could be wrong on this, and if I am, I apologize, I'm an idiot, but I don't think the PlayStation 5 has anything yet to be confirmed that's going to run at 120 frames per second. At least I don't believe. So as of right now, this is something Microsoft can say this is an exclusive, and we are doing something that you can only do on our console. So, I mean, yeah, this is the kind of news and the kind of the kind of thing that they needed, in my opinion. It was a necessary audible, if you will, if I can draw from football a little bit. They changed the play at the line of scrimmage, and I do think it'll pay off for them. And I hope it pays off for them. And Jeffrey and I kind of get like, well, damn, are we too hard on Microsoft? Like, are we just kind of needlessly shitting on them? And we really try and say that we want them to be successful. We want them to do well. When Xbox and Microsoft are doing well, it means that there is a thriving video game economy. And that ultimately benefits the industry. And I think all this news helps them with that.
Right. And I mean, both of these stories, you know, Xbox found a positive way, you know, to spin this, and, you know, basically just went ahead and confirmed everything. Like you said, I think Nintendo could do the same thing with their stuff. So, I mean, just because things get leaked, because that is the culture we are in now, does not necessarily, mean that it's a bad thing. If anything, I think this gave hype to Halo where there wasn't really any to, well, at least on my end, there wasn't really any to, really get excited for. I was kind of
Yeah.
disappointed by the whole thing. Um, but now, knowing that it's going to be part of the Xbox, you know, Game Pass thing, and you get the multiplayer on top of that. I mean, that's badass.
So apparently they were
So
going to do another conference at a certain point in time, showing
yeah,
off the multiplayer. So
right.
do you think? Which I mean, obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but in my mind, what I think they wanted to do was unveil all this information at the same time that they show
Oh
it.
yeah,
So that way it
yeah.
would have been like a bigger, a bigger bomb drop. And again, that's why I go back to saying, dude, they have to do better with this information. Like all
They do.
like toy stores and retail chains releasing this information, like it's happened so many times that, in my mind, it requires them to pivot. Like they need to call an
Right.
audible on what information they do and don't release. I think.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, and um, I think I think the shit should have been handled during that conference that we saw. Um, this should not be something that came later down the line. I mean, unless they truly just weren't done with it yet, there is no excuse for them not having uh, a multiplayer segment in the conference that just passed that we reacted to, because that's Halo's big point. Not only that, but it's like, I mean, unless the system was just completely broken, which I highly doubt, that all this shit should have been put in to the first conference to begin with, because I think it would have generated more hype. Um, but
Well,
I
it
don't
also
know.
goes back
That's
to like, so when reviewers, whenever they get a video game to review, like before the game comes out, they
right,
have this thing called an embargo. Like they have to
right,
sign, like they're not allowed to spoil the game before the release date. Like there's certain information that they're just not allowed to put out there. It would seem as though you would be able to do the same thing for information regarding your video game to retailers like that. Like
right.
they shouldn't be allowed to put out that information unless they were given express permission to do so. And then it even says in the article that Smith's Toys that the post went up and then they brought it back down. They took it down.
Right.
So it's like if they knew, if they knew that they weren't allowed to do it, then they should face like some kind of repercussions for putting out that kind of. I mean, you
Yeah,
know what I'm saying?
definitely.
That might sound kind of heavy fisted,
Yeah.
but like,
No, it's true.
if I'm Microsoft, and I want to deliver things in the most impactful way possible, yeah, I wanted to release that information on my own terms, and also like, who knows, like that could have been something that they were still working on. Maybe it wasn't
Right.
a decision that they had actually made yet. But
Hmm.
because this comes out and people are talking about it and speculating on it, now you run the risk of saying, oh, well, it's actually not free to play. And then everyone gets pissed off because they thought the rumors were true. And they would have been like, oh, that would have been incredible if it was free to play. And,
Hmm.
it seems like there's impactful ramifications that leaks have on this business. And that's kind of the theme of our show today. It's like,
Yeah.
how necessary are leaks, and how much power should a company be able to have in protecting their information and
Yeah.
their intellectual property. And that's a conversation that extends far beyond video games also.
Right. Well, I think in Microsoft's case, it also comes down to the marketing team, right? So, um, a lot of these outlet chains and stuff, GameStop and all these other places, they're given this information early so that they can prep for um, releases, and having their website tailored right for descriptions and stuff. But there again lies the issue, right? So Sam's Toys, they probably had all this information, ready to go so that, you know, they could start securing. I know it's still a long way off, but you still have to, consider securing pre-orders and all kinds of things and how your website looks and all that stuff. Um, and sometimes it's just as simple a mistake as clicking a damn button and suddenly things are live.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's technically how it went down, but I imagine that's pretty much the case. That it was just marketing material that either was stolen by a disgruntled employee or accidentally posted online when it was supposed to be. So that begs the question: how much information should be given to these outlets, you know, before the release of a game? Like, what do you deem a worthy timeline? So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
could be a number of factors.
It could. Um, Ultimately, like I said, this is going into a new console cycle. Um, there's so many questions about the future of gaming, and are we moving to uh, streaming, and now we're not having disc anymore.
Mhm.
There's, it really does feel like the video game industry is going through this metamorphosis where they're kind of getting rid of the practices that kind of no longer fit today's economy. Like free to
Right.
play, in my opinion, if you wanted to continue to make a video game as profitable for as long as possible, you would go with a free to play system. And
Yep.
because even though you're not getting that money for the video game, the more work that you put in and putting out aesthetics and things of that nature, uh, it's going to continue to incentivize people to want to play and play that game in a new way. And if they're good with updates and continuing to give players contents to be able to do together, like honestly, I mean, I'll just be 100% real with you. Like if I'm playing Halo, dude, I don't give a shit about the story. The only
Right.
reason that I'm gonna play that is for the multiplayer and being able to play with my friends. I mean, that's kind of how it is for me with every shooter. Like I don't,
Right.
there aren't too many shooters, not too many first-person shooters. I'd say that have a super compelling, gripping story. Wolfenstein, the most recent Wolfenstein did. I enjoyed that, but being able to continue to populate an online world with content that players want. And by the way, hopefully this is only aesthetics, right? Hopefully,
Right.
once they do this battle pass, this isn't a scenario where they're all of a sudden, a brand new type of gun or a weapon or a type of grenade or
That's
something.
what I was afraid
Yeah.
of. Yeah. Um,
Do
but
you think
seeing
that?
it's
Let me ask you this: do you think that there is a danger of that? Because I would actually say no, seeing as how good they've been on trying to give people bang for their buck with the Xbox Series X Game Pass. Like right now, they haven't shown like a lot of greed. Like they really have kind of done well in wanting to put out stuff for the gamers. So that kind of makes me think that they wouldn't do something like that. What do you think?
I hope you're right, but on the other end of the coin though, that also gives them an excuse to do this. So
Yeah.
technically, if you're getting the game for a reduced price because you're part of the Xbox Series Game Pass, right? So they want to make extra money. So they
Right.
very well may hide things behind paywalls because they're like, oh, well, you didn't pay a full $60 for this, so we're gonna put in shit, or we're gonna
So
put
you
in
think it's almost
gun.
justifiable on their part?
Yeah, it is. I hope it's not. I hope they don't do it.
Well,
But
that's what I was going to ask you. If you think that it is in some way justifiable, would it? If you're an Xbox player and you're playing Halo, would you be that upset if your Game Pass? Think of it this way: if you were playing and you were going to buy the Game Pass anyway for all the
Right.
for all the aesthetic stuff, then it's almost like, well, you might as well drop us some items and shit. Because
Right.
it's you're recouping your money, and it's for the people that want to continue to support the developers and support the game for them having to take a haircut off the top for people not charging so much.
Right. I guess it just depends how big the disparity is between those that haven't bought the battle pass and those that do. So, like, if if having the battle pass, for example, gives you a super powered weapon that like nobody can fucking stand against,
Right.
that's obviously not fair. And I hope they
Right.
wouldn't do anything like that, but it is a possibility. You know, I just don't want to see the free to play players be left in the dust simply because
Right.
they didn't pony up however it is,
You don't want
however much
free
it
to
is for the battle
play
pass.
you don't want free to play to turn into pay to play.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I understand that. I think a lot of people kind of echo that sentiment. I don't necessarily like I said right now. I think this is a good thing for Xbox, for 343. I think this is a good thing for the game. Yeah, and it's weird. I do have faith in them that they are going to do this correctly. For as much as I shit on them, as much as we heap the praises of Xbox and of PlayStation rather, and their platform exclusives. Right now, this is a good way to make Halo, or to do your best to make Halo as relevant to the Xbox Series X as the original Halo was to the original Xbox. So, maybe not quite that much, but it's an attempt to do that because Halo has always been the driving force behind Xbox. They're synonymous with one another. So, yeah, this is it's a good thing for them, and ultimately, I think it's been a good week for gaming. I think overall, when you combine these two stories, what kind of seemed like a slow leak of news and information, no pun intended there. It ended up becoming a good conversation about ethics and what we are and aren't allowed to know, and what information should and shouldn't be out there. But it's good in that fans are getting more of the things that will actually benefit them as players. And I think overall that's what we all really want.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. Is I don't think any of the content that was taken from Nintendo was done so in a malicious sense. They just wanted to see what was going on. It's not like they did steal files and stuff, but it's not like they sold them to the highest bidder or anything. Like they went directly on 4chan where anybody could get it. Not that you should go on 4chan, mind you, because there's some shit on there. But
or you should.
My point being, like, it's not like they were selling Nintendo's high trade secrets or anything.
Yeah.
This was just information for the coders to decode, for the fans to see what could and could not have been done. Same thing for the Halo thing. I don't think any malicious intent was meant. I think there was just a slip up somewhere, and even if it was, it's not a huge deal. If anything, it's a plus for Microsoft. So, all in all, yes, stuff got stolen, but I think the way it was handled and the what has become of it is a positive thing. So, if developers look at it that way, I don't think it's so bad.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, Jeffrey, why don't you go ahead and tell all of our viewers where they can find you online, as we have concluded another episode of the Cripple Connection podcast.
Cool. So, yeah, they can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jeffrored, so JEFFRORED.
Awesome. And as always, I am Cody Lashner. You can find me on Twitter at Cody Lack, CODYLAC. You can find me every Tuesday night on the C3 Carolina Cat Chronicles podcast. And every Friday or Saturday, we're still talking about that here on the Cripple Connection podcast. So As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. And as always, peace and love.
Peace, guys.